Hi, everybody. Welcome to another version of the Bruce Singer podcast. I want to share about this podcast. And by the way, this is a specific series. The podcast is all about food, agriculture, farming, the entire food ecosystem. That's the space we play in. And in terms of this podcast, talking about financing, everything around it. This particular series is very exciting for everybody and for me and for the listeners, focusing on the XPRIZE Foundation and XPRIZE Feed the Next Billion, which has a program that the actual prize is $15 million split amongst the winners. And we're going to talk about it in a podcast. There's more coming. This is actually one of multiple podcasts in this series, and it's very exciting. And today we have a very exciting finalist that has made it in the journey with the XPRIZE organization, and is one of the finalists. And it's Miguel Neumann of Eternal. And before we talk about Miguel, I just want to share a bit more. I'm Bruce Singer. I'm the host, and I'm also the founder and CEO of Canada's CFOs, Inc., which provides fractional CFOs and interim CFOs to early stage companies, again, in food, agriculture, the food space, biotech, health, wellness, a whole bunch of areas. And it's really cool. And we're going to move on and talk about our guest on the podcast. So, Miguel, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Bruce. Very happy to be here.
It's awesome. So I want to tell you about Miguel. He's the CEO and former CFO, which I even love even more because that's definitely up our alley. Former CFO and co-founder of Eternal Bioworks, and he's going to explain to you more what that's all about. He's done a lot of traveling. He's worked all over. He's worked in multiple places all over the world internationally most of his life. He's competed in multiple triathlons. He has a son, proud father, and he has about over 10 years of experience in startups, raising capital, finance, operations. He's a real strategic finance thinker in addition to being a CEO and a leader. He's also worked with JP Morgan as an investment banker. So we have lots to talk about in this podcast, and I'm excited to have him on today. And again, thank you so much for coming on, and we're going to get right into it. Okay. So first, Miguel, tell us about what is Eternal Bioworks. What is it all about?
So Eternal started with the idea of a visionary, which was not me, by the way, the founder of a business. He was a guy that had done very many startups that was looking into innovation, new materials, sustainable products, technology, artificial intelligence, a variety of things. And one day he realized that a very important problem in the world was that not everyone had access to good quality nutrition. And that was a problem because especially while you're growing up, you don't have the right amount of protein, you don't develop your brain fully, which means that you perpetrate the cycle of poverty by not being able to achieve your potential. So what does this guy do? He goes and talks to a biotechnologist, say, hey, what is the best source of protein that can grow rather fast and can be produced like just, very simply and very fast and broadly and everywhere? And this poor biotechnologist, which is now our lead scientist, said, okay, let me think about it. And he presented to him a microorganism that is very, very fast growing and has a complete amino acid profile, and it's rich in fibers and has a lot of protein in it. So, okay, this thing, we can grow it in bioreactors. It's a microscopic fungus. And by this point, the founder of the business, a guy named Horacio, he was saying, okay, but can I grow this like a mushroom? Well, not really. You need bioreactors for that. So there's machinery involved and technology. So he went on and said, okay, let me think about it. I'll go and talk to a guy. So he speaks to a gentleman that is specialized in artificial intelligence, who comes in and he explained this idea to him, which is Lucas, who works on innovation in our firm, and says, okay, we found this organism. We need you to optimize it. of course, knowing this guy Lucas, is all right, challenge accepted, let's do it. So together he started working with the biotechnologist, and they started working on producing the most sustainable ingredient that can be broadly adopted on the food industry. And this is what microfood is, the key product that we make at Eternal. That's a protein that you can include in smoothies, you can include it in burgers, you can make a chicken breast like the one that took us to the final in the XPRIZE, and you can even make it in space.
Okay, you just got my attention. Okay, how the heck do you grow food? Is it growing food, right? Or is it food?
It is growing food, yes.
How the heck can you grow food in space? Are we talking like real stuff? Please, I'm a consumer. Try to keep it simple, like science. Yeah.
Trust me, this is not rocket science. It's food science.
Okay.
Now,
yeah, good point.
So
rocket science.
The interesting point in all that is that the first prototype that we have while we were working on the early days of the company was a small device that was created to be like, like a mini fridge that you put on your kitchen. And instead of going to the supermarket and getting food, you have something that will press a button and it'll just create a fresh ingredient that you could put into your meals, and it will be the source of every single nutrient you needed. That was the idea. That was the goal. Now, that prototype had the size of a mini fridge. It actually got built. That's actually our company's first patent. Got built, but in that small space, you have about more moving parts than you have in a car. So after having a couple of conversations, less into the vision and more about the business, we realized that it wasn't commercially viable to have that type of equipment on a kitchen. Now, the question is, where is the space where you're going to have very limited availability of space of any type of supplies, and where actually an expensive product wouldn't be a problem so long as it solves the problem of keeping a smoker alive? And that place is a spaceship. So when the NASA started releasing a program called the NASA Deep Space Food Challenge, it was focused on finding a solution for lack of fresh ingredients on long-term ambitions. So if, for example, if you're going a year and a half to Mars and a year and a half back, plus the time in the planet's surface, there's literally nothing that you can freeze. I mean, other than military rations or stabilized rations that you can eat.
Yeah.
So all the kind of stuff that is also heavy to carry was what people had in mind. And there was already a recorded drop in performance where people need to carry on eating the same day after day. So we jumped in and we started working, adapting our initial prototype into space use by connecting it into the other services they have on a spaceship, considering what are the inputs and the outputs, where you have carbon dioxide, where you have water that you can capture, where you have waste that you can transform into sugars that you can use into a bioreactor. So that is what got us to win the first phase of the Deep Space Food Challenge and to win the second phase. And interestingly, we were competing against companies that were a team backed by Billy Gates. We won. They didn't. I don't think Billy is crying, but
no, he's not crying. But that's one heck of innovation. So what? Is it as simple from a consumer layman, like a microwave? I push the button and I get my food. Is it that simple? Is it that?
Yep. So
and
yes,
it tracks all because the water. I guess there's water in. I don't know how it works in space, but there must be all the key, like you said, the key ingredients that are available. And I won't get into the waste side. But
let's avoid that.
I can just use my imagination. Okay.
A lot of things that happen in a spaceship or in a base in low orbit actually are reused. So every single bit of humidity you have floating around, you can recapture. If you're growing vegetables and you have like micro veggies, all the waste can be composted. There are a lot of things that you can use as source of energy to produce fresh food. But the key component in here is something that, as you described, is managed by a small computer that has
Wow.
an AI program that you just literally press a button and the thing produces this ingredient.
That's amazing.
Now,
That's amazing.
what we are doing for the third phase is taking that further into something that looks more like an espresso. Can we say the brand? Like just a coffee machine. You just put the pod, press a button, and you get an ice cream. You press another button, and you get a burger.
You know, this is like almost like Star Trek. You know the show where they
Yep.
have the, what do they call it on the Star Trek? They have the the food dispenser. Like they just push the
Yep.
button and they just call. They want an ice cream. It creates an ice cream. It creates. You watch the
That is
show.
what. Yeah.
That's like,
That is what we. That
yeah.
is what we're working towards,
Isn't that amazing?
and
That's awesome. That's
it's an
awesome.
and it's funny because we're working hard on getting some concepts that used to be in sci-fi
Yeah,
to be actual science, and we're
unbelievable.
getting there.
It was called the replicator. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Anyway, so let's get. I want to talk. I want to switch topics for a moment. We'll come back. Um, how did you get into this, Miguel? Like you're a CFO. You got a finance background. Like there's got to be a journey that took place, and I'm really curious to find out how you evolved into this area of business.
So it's been an interesting journey. So it started with, I mean, my first area of career was mostly on creativity and engineering, nothing to do with finance. But after I worked for a bit in investment banking, I started working with startups. And one of the things that I realized was that while the vision was always clear, the way to achieve that vision wasn't necessarily there. And I think I grew tired of seeing really good ideas and people with immense potential not being able to realize it. And part of that was because it is very different to be able to conceive an idea and go from 0 to 1 to go from 1 to many. And I looked into that, and there was a strong gap that I found, pretty much like what you do in a way. That is that there
Yep.
were things missing, and those things missing were how do you actually look into your vision, make sure that it's profitable? What bits are missing? What regulation aspects you need to look into? What is the operational model you need to follow? What are there any legal concerns or constraints that you need to abide by? So these kind of things, when you're dreaming big about a company, go just completely just away, are not part of a focus. So in a way, I have been the boring guy for people that has been quite interesting, that comes in and say, okay, with my feet on the ground, I can see this idea and tell you that you're gonna need X, Y, Z. And those kind of things were what helped me to be the right hand of several founders and help them to get to the next stage, either by saying, look, this is going well, but you need to raise funds in order to go at the right pace, or saying, no, this is not the time. You don't have what you need to go and hit the market for money. Or it's just simply saying, okay, let's look into this. What are the unit economics? Do you know if you're going to be a great deal of like a massive business for your investors or just for your clients? Who is going to win out of what you're doing? A lot of that thinking that is part strategic, but a lot of that is just, again, just looking at the numbers and thinking thoroughly about it is what most of the creators and the dreamers find difficult. So that's how it started. And that's exactly how I got into Eternal. So I was invited to join as the CFO when the company was struggling to find a valuation model that would apply for a startup that was on an interim state with a lot of things achieved, but pre-product, because being post-product meant having a factory working. So you're not looking anymore into, for example, putting together a company that just needs a few servers and two guys crunching code. No disrespect to that, but it's a complete different financial need to an industrial focused business. And they could not get to evaluation after months working with economists. So that was my first assignment, just work with the CEO at the time, just being able to define what was the value of a business, to be able to then say, okay, now we know how much we're worth. Let's say how much is worth or commercial side or relationships. Let's talk about this and see if there's interest. And there was interest out there. And eventually I closed the first investment round. And that was part of, again, working with what we had, understanding the value, understanding the market, and just advising the other founders saying, hey, this is what we're going to do now. And then it was a choice. We found a group of investors that backed us up, which then led to a bunch of other things. And eventually, and over time, where the company was less about the dream and more about running it efficiently.
I got it.
The board decided, the board decided that I was better suited to run it. And honestly, I know that probably on the next phase of a company, we will need probably someone that has much deeper connections on the sales side of the business to take it further. Yeah. But I think something that many times is unsaid is that through the entire life cycle of a company, you do have different people that will be great for several roles, and those aren't fixed. So if you have a fixed mindset, well, probably a startup is not a great place for you. But if you understand these cycles, you can actually plan to let the company grow and to say, okay, this is going to be what I'm going to be doing now. And now I'm going to step back and bring the right person to take it forward. And that is something that I think doesn't necessarily come. I mean, I haven't seen it as something that you learn that much, either working on a small business or in a big one, or in a startup. I don't think it's part of the curriculum of most MBAs. I think these are things that you need to be on the ground just to figure out. But I think that's a little bit of what the journey across Eternal was and how I actually got there. Mm-hmm. But again, before that, there were other companies that had similar issues and where I played similar roles, understanding where was the gap, just jumping in, just helping to put the bits together. And almost always it was the same, understanding and doing the boring stuff that comes alongside the big dream.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of great takeaways on that. But again, it's mixing the dreams with the facts and the figures. Am I right? Like,
indeed,
you got to bring
absolutely.
In you're articulating. You're bringing in the facts. You're bringing in the numbers, and you're merging it with the dreams and the vision, and then evaluate and bring it all together to create this. You call it ecosystem, whatever, to make it happen. You know,
that's what brings
to make it happen.
That's what brings value. That's what brings value. You need to have the idea, you need to have the operations, you need to have the strategy, you need to put it all together.
And you need the money, which is the other thing too, which is part of the fundraise. So let's talk about XPRIZE. I want to get in there. They're a tremendous organization. This is the you're a finalist in the Feed the Next Billion, which is a $15 million prize US that is shared. It's a pretty big purse, the biggest in the world. Very exciting, backed by tremendous people. This particular one is the Tony Robbins Foundation, Aspire, and it's unbelievable. So I'd love to hear your journey. How did that happen? How did it go about? What's it like being part of it? Like, how do you, like, whether it's a $250,000 fundraise or a $50 million fundraise or a $15 million fundraise, not fundraise. It's not a fundraise. It's a grant. It's not. It's a prize. I hate the word. I don't want to use fundraise. The journey's got to be. There's got to be some takeaways and similarities and similarities in all these programs. Can you share the learnings and the insights on this program, with how it affects you and your company?
So I think for us it was great because it was a very strong incentive for people to line up towards a goal. So while on average day you go to a lab in an R&D center and they're going to be thinking about, texture, flavors, maybe doing chicken, maybe improving the burger, maybe just making a better cheese, or like, we had a goal. We had to find a way of making the best chicken breast analog, and if possible, to also make it as economically as possible. So the idea of this award, which I think is a great cause to be supporting, is just to feed the next billion as the entire population of the world with something that you can grow anywhere, that could be nutritious, that could be tasty, but also is quite universal. So it helped our team to organize towards a single goal, and just to, well, apparently excel at it. So we were very surprised, I think positively, of course, when we got the news that we were into the semifinals. So we made our application. We found about this opportunity. I mean, we were familiar with XPRIZE, particularly because of the collaborations they had in the space sector. And when we knew that there was a call for food, we jumped on. We made our application. We described what we wanted to do. We explained what we were doing, and all of a sudden, it was this moment of when they announced that we were in the semifinals, and we're okay. So this is real. This is happening, and it was interesting. It worked in. I mean, for us, it forced our developers to work to get that new chicken breast. But also, what's amazing. So I was posting a video of the guys on the lab shredding a bit of this chicken breast analog that is it's made out of mushrooms, basically. And I just posted the video online. I was sharing it with people, and I had just people coming to me and asking, hey, why is someone using gloves to get a chunk of chicken? What's going on? It's like, well, it's because that's a lab and that's not chicken. And the moment where I had people coming to me saying, oh, I didn't realize, I was saying, okay, this can fly. And eventually we made it through the semifinals. We got into the finals. We actually went with the organizers. We had a great time with them. The team did a demonstration of the product. We got a great scoring, and only 1 week ago, we got our version 1 prototype that we're going to be sending for the final. And it looks great. It tastes amazing. And again, I'm just getting very excited because
It's unbelievable.
Independently of the price that could be, well, of course, substantial for our business, there is something else. It's the promotion, it's supporting a great idea, is also being able to drive what innovation should look like. We're solving a real problem, trying to make food accessible to people, good quality food with good ingredients, nothing that is going to be harming the world. It's good for the environment. All these things bring into something that, again, in the end, looks like a chicken breast with a few jumps along the line. Like, I don't know, there was a moment of panic trying to make some samples that were stuck in the UK to get in, I don't know, almost unachievable amount of time to an evaluation team in the Middle East. I mean, everything went fine, but not without just occasionally sweating a little.
Of course. So you open up something. Before we end the podcast, I just want to talk about something. You talked about the innovation. What can you share? You said solve problems. I guess this has to do with the trends or what's going on in the world of agriculture and the future of food. What can you share? Can you share your insights on the whole trend concept and where we're going and what's happening?
Well, I'll give you an idea of how I see this going. I believe that there are major forces playing how the society currently sees food. And what I mean the society is like, you have on one hand the governments are pushing for decarbonizing the world and more sustainability measures put in place that are going to be directives, and then in turn they'll turn potentially into fines if people don't find a better way of producing food. You have consumers that are desperately trying to find more ethical ways to eat better food, better products, and those that aren't harmful to the planet. And then you have companies looking into this and seeing that in one hand they have the carrot, being able to please their consumers with products that align with their values, and the stick, the government telling them, look, either you play ball with us and you produce this in a sustainable way, or fines will come. So I think that is combining what is going to trigger what I call agriculture 2.0. So Ag 2.0 for me is when we move away from traditional farming for not considering the environmental cost into the cost of your product, and you move into something that is more comprehensive. You do a cradle-to-grave analysis of what's going to be the total cost of your product. You look into what's the impact that has your product within society, within the country that you live, and then you produce something that is better. And I think in many ways that means that we're going to have to start thinking about new ways of producing food. So we are leveraging that. We are using microorganisms. We're putting factories that if you want to use the same infrastructure of an oil rig and put it in the middle of the ocean, you could. You don't need the land, you don't need the water. You have ways of making things different. And I think it's just a matter of time between it's no longer an option. It's what people will demand, and it's what governments will push for, and it's what companies will want to do. So I think that's the biggest trend that we're seeing, this shift into Ag 2.0.
So it could be, even if a company goes through, even if a country goes through a drought, I mean, it can solve that problem too. Like is this where we're going? Like companies, the part of the world with all the climate, things are going to change. It can be anywhere and anywhere, like even all over the world. Is that where this is going?
Even space, but back to the world.
Exactly.
But back to the world, and I think we have seen through the pandemic that a lot of the supply chains tightened or ceased to exist.
Yeah.
And in order to be able to have food sovereignty and to be able to provide for good quality nutrition in a variety of places, you need to make it less weather dependent. So if you live on a desert-like area, of course, you're going to want a food system that doesn't require the same type of irrigation or doesn't need to be watered as frequently. And this is something that also happens with other places. If you don't have a landmass, take the case of Singapore, that had to desperately start importing food from New Zealand because the traditional routes via Malaysia were all cut and disrupted. So simply people didn't have what to eat. And at that point, these concerns become plans, and those plans becomes initiatives that then get put into place. So I believe that the change is coming because people want to make sure that even if there are disruptions over the world, they will be able to carry on eating good quality and nutritional food.
That's amazing. Miguel, this has been very, 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 very insightful and quite inspiring. And I appreciate you coming to the podcast. We can talk for hours about a lot of things, but I wanted to ask you one more thing before we end the podcast. Is there any other question that I didn't ask that's something you'd like to share that you think is important to the audience?
Well, I think it goes down to something that we were chatting about, that is making sure that if you're going to dream big, you don't forget to do the boring stuff. Good. And I think something we connected also with fundraising as well.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and there are a lot of things that need to be in place. Understanding what is your business model, understanding how much money you can make, understanding your market, having the right documentation in place to be able to convince a finance guy to give you money, because you need to convince him that what you are giving him is insignificant. Well, what you're going to give him is materially, substantially more than what you're asking for. If you can't make that math work and make it work for a finance person, you need to reshuffle, because and this is what is important about the financing side of it, which I think is also important. It's where things start, because you will otherwise see brilliant ideas that go nowhere because simply don't have the right support. And for that is putting the contracts in place, making the forecast, being conscious about how you make them, ensuring that you have the right team or the right people to be able to do that. So then when you're having a conversation and you're talking to financiers, you're actually going with the right tools. So then you're successful, because ultimately that's what you want. You want to bring success to companies that are changing the world. And for doing that, I think at some point you're going to need help. And that help many times comes in the shape of capital. And for that, you
Correct.
need to be able to speak the right language and have the right tools and documents to make sure that people see you as the next big thing, that you have the potential, but also you've done your homework. And I think that that's really important. And that's a must, not a nice to have.
Interesting. Thank you so much. This has been very, very insightful and thank you so much for coming on. And I wish you and your team much success through again, I know the process is continuing. The finals are coming up in 2024, and I wish you all the best. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Take care, Miguel.
Thank you for having me, Bruce. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next time on the podcast. Take care.